could just give a little bit of background of NanoVision and how it came about and what the mission is.
Well, thanks, Brendan. The NanoVision is a company that we have developed during the last several years to really revolutionize healthcare through technology at a very fundamental level. The short story on it is it's the culmination of a lot of thinking and design over actually decades of having been involved with founding and building and taking public a number of different technology and healthcare companies, and also 8 years in the White House in the post that I had as a senior advisor to U.S. President George W. Bush, and co-chairing the group that was responsible for all of science, technology, and healthcare, which leads you into many different areas. And NanoVision is a company that we are building to engineer healthcare and medical from the ground up, if you will, from molecular level right to direct primary care for patients, and everything in between. Because the basis of it is that connecting real life, the way that we've connected the internet, and having direct access to real-time molecular data flows is the fundamental key to transforming everything having to do with diagnostics, testing, and actually developing cures. So the full cure platform is based on perpetual usage and access to molecular data.
In our conversations, you'd also mentioned that blockchain is a part of what you guys are developing, and it was really fascinating to me because you had mentioned that there's because this past year, at least in the United States, the flu has been a huge huge epidemic. Like, people were dying from it, everybody was really sick and going to the hospitals. And you've said in our conversations that blockchain could eventually cure the flu. Is that correct?
Well, blockchain is a fundamental technology that, taken with other technologies, can be part of the platform that should effectively cure virtually all major diseases and conditions, health conditions. So it's part of that solution. Blockchain itself represents a way to capture data, everything from research data to medical data to diagnostic data to drug development data in a way that can completely blow the model wide open in terms of exponentially adding intellectual horsepower and technology horsepower to cures development and to developing new drugs and new therapeutics and new treatments and new ways of actually interacting with people in a health curative manner, meaning not the way we do it today. So influenza is a great example. Why is it in 2018, exactly 100 years after one of the worst pandemics in human history, in modern human history, when we had over 100 million people die of the flu in 1918, and in 2018 we had hundreds of thousands of people die of the flu and millions of people seriously impacted, many others with life-threatening conditions. It seems impossible that in this day and age that we haven't solved that fundamental problem, and yet we haven't. Every year it's a dartboard of trying to guess at getting a vaccine that might hit 10 to 12% effectiveness, maybe 20%. Is it influenza A or B? Which strain and where and how does it move around the world?
And when you talk about engineering cures, is it possible that we will get to a point where we can engineer a cure for cancer per se?
We can engineer cures over time to just about anything in health. And you have to go back to the premises. A, what is a cure? A cure to me is having a therapeutic capability that either eliminates or manages the debilitating aspects of whatever health issue it is, even something like cancer. Having some cancer cells in and of themselves is not life-threatening in any way. Having those progress to where they become life-threatening because they're out of control is what takes people's lives and or seriously impacts them. That's true with superbugs. It's true with virtually all invasive and highly replicable diseases as well as health conditions like cancer. So if you go back and attack the very mechanism by which these work, and the very mechanism by which we actually harness the underlying molecular information and then develop a curative process that you're perpetually monitoring, perpetually diagnosing, and perpetually curing, and feeding that data right back into personalized medicine, right back to the individuals, including their genomics, you've got a whole new model. So you've got to start with the whole platform, and then you can apply that platform approach.
And I think it's fascinating that in culture and society today, everybody is focused on the story of how we're going to get to Mars or how we're going to get to the moon. Everybody's fascinated with Elon Musk building colonies on different planets and focusing on outer space. But what you're really doing, which is fascinating as well, is focusing on inner space. Can you talk a little bit about that and also the similarities between studying inner space versus outer space?
Absolutely, Brendan. The outer space is fascinating. It's lifelong and throughout history, staring off into space and dreaming and wondering. You know, we've come a long way from the time when we thought the world was flat and that it was heresy to say anything otherwise. But that has only been a few hundred years, right? But we're still in the world is flat for inner space in a lot of ways. So what is inner space? It's not just looking within your body. Inner space is crossing over that boundary at the 100 nanometer level, which is essentially into nanoscale. Once you move into nanoscale, you're like outer space, you're in a world, if you will, that behaves very differently. There is no gravitational pull. Objects and items, even including the surface of a silicon or carbon atom, change shape. The shapes change. The physics changes. You have superconductivity of electrical properties. And so when you move into nanoscale, there are a whole set of conditions like outer space that you understand how to navigate, how to harness, and how to engineer. And in inner space lies the answer, because that's virtually all the molecular level, at everything we're talking about, engineering, building out the technology and the components to perpetually connect to, monitor, diagnose, and cure virtually all major conditions. And having that connectivity and that understanding of that data on an ongoing basis is fundamental to that.
So really, at the end of the day, there's two aspects to what you're doing. There's the actual technology that's going to make the diagnosis on a nano level, whether that be a chip inserted into the body or a chip that's inserted into different medical technology or platforms. And then there's also the data and analysis of it, because it's not just a matter of just getting that data, you have to understand what to do with it. Is that a correct assumption of what you guys are building?
What we're building first is the foundation element. Just think back a few years, and it wasn't very long ago, and we said, hey, the internet's coming, the internet's coming. Well, that's cool. What's going to happen? We're going to connect everything. Really? Yeah, everything. All the computers are going to be connected, and then the computers will become smaller, they'll become smartphones, that's going to get connected, and therefore, people and content and knowledge sharing will be connected at a massive basis. Well, that's happened. You know, in the last 15 to 20 years, we have connected up the content and the communications. What we haven't touched is the connectivity of life. And so the same process we'll go through. So developing the chips, the generation of edge computing with AI on the chip with tremendous capability, disseminating that level of connectivity. So we're going to connect up the things on and around and eventually in our bodies. We're going to connect the things that we use to understand what's going on with health. Human health, environmental health, microbiome health. It's completely disconnected. Starting from going to a physician, stethoscope, most measurements that are taken, most data that's taken is either not captured at all or used in the moment, but nothing is connected. And that's only on a one-time basis. When you think about, I don't even have that. So let's connect all of that up, including all the laboratory equipment, including all the microscopes, including all of the diagnostics procedures. But hey, let's actually move to connecting up those information gathering elements of our own bodies and our surroundings on an ongoing basis. Now we're going to start to get to a connectivity layer, and once you have that, even in process, you're going to be, like we saw with the internet, gathering up incredible amounts of ongoing data, molecular data, environmental data, genomic data, and you have a new platform that you can use to engineer diagnostic and curative capabilities. Just like we saw a transformation with the internet into e-commerce and into content, we will see a vastly greater transformation in the connectivity of life.
And you made a great point earlier when we were talking about the fact that today we can pretty much diagnose any virus on a computer, yet for the human, we can't do the same. So everything that you're talking about, will it lead to that solution of being at that level of scale where we could to identify any virus that's going on with our body and be able to detect it before it gets too bad and also be able to treat it?
Yeah, a lot of the constructs that we are used to dealing with in our own technological lives actually do have parallels. And we're just not using them right now because we are not connected and we don't have that level of technology. So it's funny that we use the term antivirus software because we're going to go fight viruses or new outbreaks of viruses, which happen all the time, right? They mutate, and we download patches, and we say, hey, you got to download this patch. Make sure you have it everywhere because otherwise you're not safe. And yet, we can't detect actual viruses or understand the mutations going on with those and then download patches for those. We haven't done that. Doesn't mean we can't. Moving into that mode of how we deal with health care as a continuous process and understand that there's underlying data and technology at life level just like there is at an electronic level. So downloading a patch to a virus into your body, here comes a mutated version of even something, something like the flu and the viruses associated with that. And hey, guess what? We can download patches because drugs today and vaccines are delivered as a single shot. It's kind of like software. It's like use it once and that's it. There's no way to update it. There's no way to patch it. There's no way to add on to it. There's no way to even understand how it's being used. So the platform at nanoscale of connecting up life, the blockchain elements we call Cure Chain, that all gives you a platform, and that connected environment means that you can do things like download patches. You can understand changes that are going. You can match them up with personal genomics and environmental microbiome information and continuously fine-tune to what's happening in real life. So that platform has a parallel.
So is it, if I'm hearing you correctly, there is, in the not so distant future, we could dream of a world that we get a notification on our phone, and maybe in the future it's not our phone, it's another device, but it says, hey, we've detected that you have the flu or on the onsets of getting the flu. Would you like to download this patch to prevent it from scaling to the flu?
Yes, and you should, and we should have a lot more information about things like that. So if we're in a room like this, we're at a conference, or if we're on a crowded subway or a flight or public transportation or anywhere, you also should have information that is triangulating to let us know that there are movements, if you will, in population health of certain fast-moving, fast-mutating types of diseases, infections, flus, bird flu, a lot of the things that get very scary very quickly, Zika, and other conditions like that. And if you have that information that is self-reporting or self-detecting, you can actually predict movement in that. You can also take that information rapidly and move it into cure developments to fine-tune for that particular set of markers or that particular set of DNA mutation, and then propagate it out in a way that can apply to people directly. So the key is actually having a model for that and having a platform for understanding that life is that level of connected information. And you need to connect to it, harness it, use it, and drive that from monitoring just daily activities in life right back into the cure development process and not setting these apart as silos as if one has nothing to do with another, which leads to decades and decades of disconnected cure developments and clinical trials and things like that.
Great, and just to wrap up with one more thing, because it's just so fascinating talking to you specifically around the outer space versus inner space. Again, that everybody's focused on a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk, focusing on how we get to Mars, focusing how we get to the moon and colonize other planets. But really, in talking to you, if we don't make the investment on the inner space, we could essentially end up on Mars or the moon and not even be able to cure the diseases that we don't even know about by living on those planets.
We could easily have our most amazing astronauts and vehicles take off and send people on their way to Mars, only to die of a mutated superbug or even a basic flu or cold on the way, not to mention mutations that happen with radiation. So we have to go to where we know more about what's happening at inner space inside our microbial and molecular cells and surroundings than we do in outer space. I think that's the goal. It's great to want to conquer and habitate outer space, but let's also land on the surface of our own cells and molecules and populate those with the technology and the understanding to connect up to those and transform, revolutionize healthcare by using the same technologies and similar that we're using to conquer outer space and do that in inner space.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the time, Steve. I really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure
Absolutely.
talking with you.
Thank you.